I swear you can hear a heartbreak. It's not loud, it's quiet, like the sound of an old photo album closing for the last time. That's what it felt like the day I saw my wife's wedding ring listed on Facebook Marketplace. Vintage gold band, good condition, $450 or best offer. My hands went numb. My wife Mary had worn that ring for 57 years. She died still wearing it. I buried her with it, or at least I thought I had. The post had my granddaughter's profile picture next to it. Ellie, 25 years old, sharp as a knife, prettier than she knows, and lately, a stranger in my own house. I clicked on the post 3 times just to make sure I was seeing it right. There it was, the delicate gold band with the little dent from when Mary dropped it on the kitchen floor back in '83. I remember teasing her about how even the ring had wrinkles now. God, she laughed so hard. Now it was for sale, $450. Need gone ASAP. I didn't move for a long time. The old clock ticked in the corner, steady and cruel. I must have read that post 100 times. Then my phone buzzed, a message from Ellie. Hey Grandpa, I'll be home late tonight. Don't wait up. Home. That word hit differently now. I didn't sleep. I sat in Mary's old armchair until dawn, holding her photograph and whispering to it like a fool. She sold it, Mare. The ring. Our ring. Maybe I was hoping she'd answer, or maybe I just needed to say it out loud before I lost my mind. When Ellie came home, the sun was rising through the lace curtains. She smelled like perfume and gasoline, that mix of youth and recklessness. Morning, Grandpa, she said, dropping her purse on the table. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I said. You selling something online? She froze for a fraction of a second. Then that bright fake smile appeared. Oh yeah, just some old jewelry I found. Needed to make room. You know, minimalism. Minimalism, I repeated softly. What kind of jewelry? Nothing important. Old stuff. She was already walking past me toward the hallway, her boots loud on the hardwood floor. Was one of those things your grandma's wedding ring? The silence that followed was heavier than any words. She stopped halfway to her room. It was just sitting in a drawer, she said finally. It's not like she's here to wear it. I think that's when something inside me cracked, not loud, just a quiet snap, like a branch breaking under snow. She's not here, I said slowly, but I am. And I remember every promise that ring ever stood for. Ellie sighed. Grandpa, please don't make this dramatic. I needed the money. For what? A car. I found a great deal on a used Toyota. I need it for work. You always said Mary would want me to move forward. Forward, yes. Over her grave, no. Her eyes rolled like I was being ridiculous. It's just a ring, Grandpa. Just a ring. After she left for work, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee until it went cold. I thought about all the years Mary and I had struggled. The factory job, the second shifts, the nights she'd pack my lunch and kiss me like she was sending me off to war. That ring had survived decades of sweat, tears, and faith. And now it was gone, turned into cash and car keys. But I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just started thinking. When you get to be my age, people mistake your silence for weakness. They think old men don't notice things, that grief makes us soft. But I've lived long enough to know silence can build a plan better than rage ever could. That night I went to my safe. It's a small metal box hidden behind a false panel in Mary's wardrobe. Inside were the house deeds, the savings bonds, and a folded envelope marked "in case of emergency." Mary had written that note in her tidy handwriting 20 years ago, when we'd first paid off the house. This home will always be our family's shelter, she'd said. Promise me it stays that way. I promised, but promises, I learned, are a two-way road. Ellie had started talking months ago about turning the place into an Airbnb gold mine. I'd laughed it off then, thinking it was just talk. But a few days after the ring incident, she came home with papers. Good news, Grandpa, she said, waving the forms. I got pre-approved for a loan. The bank said if I co-list this property, I could remodel it, make it more modern. We could live upstairs, rent out the lower floor. Easy money. She was glowing with ambition. I wanted to be proud of her. But all I could see was Mary's ring slipping out of her fingers again and again. Ellie, I said, this house isn't a business. It's a memory. Grandpa, You live in the past. The world's changing. We have to use what we've got. You mean sell what we've got, she groaned. You just don't understand. I'm trying to build a future. You can't keep holding me back with your nostalgia. Nostalgia. Another word for love, apparently. That night, I found the car in the driveway. A shiny blue Toyota, still smelling new. The license plate read LSPWR, Ellie's Power, subtle. I stood there in the dark, the porch light flickering above me, and I felt Mary's absence like a weight on my chest. She would have known what to say. She always did. But now it was just me, an old man in slippers, staring at the proof that his family's soul had a price tag. That was the night I made a decision. Quietly, carefully. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to pick up the phone. I called Mr. Harlan, the real estate agent who handled our mortgage back in the day. George, I said, this is Tom Peterson. I've got a property for sale. Need it handled discreetly. There was a pause. You sure about that, Tom? That house has been in your family forever. I'm sure, I said. It's time for a new chapter. Who's the buyer? I'll choose one myself, someone who'll understand its worth. When I hung up, I felt calm for the first time in months, like I'd finally exhaled after holding my breath for years. Ellie thought she'd traded love for convenience. She was about to learn what happens when you sell something priceless and think there's no bill coming due. She had sold my wife's ring for a car. I was about to sell her whole world for a lesson. You ever notice how quiet revenge feels when you're old? It's not like in movies. No loud music, no grand speeches. It's just silence and steady breathing, like you're finally aligning with the truth. That's how I felt the morning after I called the realtor. Calm, colder than I'd been in years. Ellie was at work when George Harlan came by. Same George I'd known since the 70s. A man who'd seen me sweat through mortgages, layoffs, and repairs I couldn't afford. He shook my hand with that half grin of his. You really serious about this, Tom? Selling your house? Serious as a funeral, I said. He looked around the kitchen at the yellowed wallpaper Mary had chosen, the little ceramic ducks still marching across the counter. This place has soul. I don't see many like it anymore. That's the problem, I said. No one sees it anymore. We sat down at the table, and I explained what I wanted. Discreet listing, private buyers only, no sign in the yard. I didn't want Ellie finding out. Not yet. He raised an eyebrow. You planning to tell her at all? When it's time. Tom, I've known you long enough to know when you're planning something. What's this about? I took a deep breath. It's about remembering who built what. My wife and I worked for 40 years to make this house a home. My granddaughter thinks it's just property. I'm going to show her the difference. George didn't ask more. He just nodded, like a man who's seen too many families tear themselves apart over square footage and inheritance. I'll find the right buyer, he said quietly. Someone who won't turn it into an Airbnb circus. That night, Ellie came home humming, the kind of careless tune only youth can afford. She tossed me a paper bag from the diner. Got your dinner, Grandpa. Double cheeseburger, just like you'd like it. I thanked her, but I could barely swallow. Watching her bounce around the kitchen, talking about her car, her new job, her friends, it all felt like static. None of it real. When I asked if she'd found a buyer for the ring, she laughed. Yeah, sold it in 10 minutes. Guess it was worth something after all. I smiled, but not the way she thought. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. George lined up a buyer, a retired couple from Oregon, nice folks who wanted to settle somewhere quiet. They'd seen pictures of the house and fell in love immediately. Cash offer, full price. The kind of deal you don't refuse. I signed the preliminary agreement that Friday. The closing date was set for 3 weeks later. On Sunday, Ellie called me into the living room. Grandpa, we need to talk. Her voice had that rehearsed firmness, the kind that means bad news. About what? About the house. I kept my face blank. What about it? I talked to a contractor friend from work. He said we could gut the basement, put in a kitchenette, rent it out. You could finally have some help with bills. I'd manage everything. You'd still live here, of course. It'd just be more modern, efficient. Efficient, another word for soulless. And how would we pay for that? I asked. That's the thing, she said, eyes bright with excitement. I could take a small loan. They'd use the house as collateral. You just have to sign off. Ah, there it was. The real reason behind the sweet smiles. I looked at her. This girl I'd raised since she was 9, since her parents' car crash turned me from grandpa to guardian overnight. I remembered the first night she slept in Mary's old bed, clutching that teddy bear like it was life itself. And now she was talking about loans, collateral, efficiency. "Ellie," I said softly, "do you remember your grandma's ring?" She frowned. "We're really back to that again? I just need to know if you regret selling it." Her expression tightened. "I regret that you're still mad about it." "I'm not mad," I said, my voice low. "I'm just taking notes." She groaned. "You're impossible sometimes." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not stupid." That night, I took Mary's photograph off the wall and placed it on my desk. "You hear that, Mare?" I whispered. "She wants to mortgage the roof over her head. Yours too." The picture didn't answer, but in the silence I could almost hear Mary's dry chuckle. "Then sell it first, Tom. Beat her to it." The following week, Ellie brought a young man home. Real estate smile, slick hair, expensive watch. "This is Chad," she said proudly. "He's helping me with my loan application." Chad shook my hand like I was a client he didn't respect. "Nice place, Mr. Peterson. Lots of potential." "Potential for what?" I asked. He grinned. "Upscale renovation, maybe even resale. You could be sitting on $500,000 here." I smiled thinly. "I already know exactly what I'm sitting on." Ellie shot me a warning look. "Grandpa, please don't be difficult." I looked between them, my granddaughter and this vulture with a clipboard, and suddenly I saw it all clear as day. They weren't seeing a home, they were seeing numbers, margins, possibilities, and I was just an old man in the way. "I won't be difficult," I said finally. "You two go ahead and make your plans." She looked surprised. "Wait, really?" "Sure," I said. "But first, let me take care of a few things on my end." That night, after they left, I called George. "List's ready," I said. "Move forward with the sale. Full steam." He hesitated. "Tom, what about your granddaughter?" "She'll find out soon enough." I didn't sleep that night. The guilt gnawed at me, but the anger kept me upright. I kept picturing Mary's ring, her hand brushing flour off her apron while she laughed in the kitchen, the way she'd twist that ring when she was thinking, the mark it left on her finger even after she passed. The next morning, Ellie came down humming again, dressed for work. "Grandpa, I'll be home late. Chad and I are going over designs." "Sure, sweetheart," I said. "Drive safe." She kissed my cheek without noticing the envelope on the counter, the one addressed to her name, sealed and waiting. Inside, a simple note. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means taking back what should never have been sold, and beneath it, a photocopy of the house's sale agreement, signed, sealed, and already in escrow. The sound of her car fading down the street was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. I stood by the window, watching the dust settle in the driveway, and whispered to the empty air, "Mary, if you can hear me, I'm doing what I have to, for her, even if she never forgives me." Because love, I realized, isn't always gentle. Sometimes it's the sound of a door closing, softly, finally, right before the truth walks in. The storm came on a Thursday. Not the kind with rain or thunder, but the kind that starts with a phone call and ends with silence so thick it makes the walls ache. It was noon when Ellie's number flashed on my phone. I'd been out back, pruning Mary's rose bushes, the last living thing she'd planted before she got sick. I wiped the dirt off my hands and answered. "Grandpa," Ellie said, her voice sharp, clipped. "What is this?" "What's what?" I asked, though I already knew. "The papers, the sale papers. Tell me this is a joke." I took my time walking inside, letting my boots creak against the wooden porch. "No joke, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice calm. "The house is sold." "Sold?" she shrieked. "You can't just—" "Grandpa, this is my home too." "Was," I corrected quietly. "It was our home. You went behind my back." I sat down at the kitchen table, the phone pressed against my ear. "You went behind mine first when you sold that ring." There was a pause, a heavy one. Then, "Oh my God, are you serious? This is about the stupid ring? You're ruining both our lives because of some piece of metal?" "That piece of metal was your grandmother's promise," I said. You turned it into a down payment on a car. Now you're learning what that kind of trade really costs. I could hear her pacing, furious. You're unbelievable. I did that for my future, for my job. You just sold everything because your feelings got hurt? I didn't answer right away. I looked around the house, the sunlight on the dining table, the photo of Mary and me on our wedding day, the faint scratch on the floor where Ellie learned to ride her tricycle indoors. You think I sold this place out of spite? I said finally. No, Ellie. I sold it because you forgot what it meant to have a home. She went quiet. I could hear her breathing, shaky and angry. Where am I supposed to go? I left you enough time, I said. 30 days. The new owners are moving in next month. You'll need to find somewhere else. You can't do this, she whispered. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out, I said softly. I'm setting you free. Free? Free from what? From taking love for granted? She hung up on me. For the rest of the afternoon, I sat at that table, the old clock ticking behind me, wondering if I'd gone too far. The guilt came and went in waves, but every time I thought about Mary's empty finger, the ache hardened into resolve again. That night, I heard the slam of the front door. Ellie came storming in, eyes red and furious. You're not doing this. You can't. I called the realtor. I called the bank. You need my signature. I shook my head. Not anymore. The house is fully in my name. Has been since your parents passed. She stared at me, trembling. So what, you just sell it and leave me homeless? You've got a job, I said quietly. A car, a college degree I paid for. You'll be fine. You think money replaces family? She shot back. You think this is going to teach me something? All it's teaching me is that you're vindictive and cruel. Her words hit like stones, but I didn't flinch. Maybe one day you'll see it differently, I said. Yeah? Maybe one day you'll realize you destroyed the only family you had left. She turned and stormed off to her room. The door slammed so hard the picture frames rattled. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the porch, listening to the wind move through the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. The air smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. Maybe I did go too far, I muttered. Maybe she's right, Mary. But then I remembered that morning, 25 years ago. Ellie, 7 years old, holding her grandmother's hand while planting those same rose bushes. Mary had smiled and said, Remember, Elle, you don't own a garden. You take care of it. It gives back what you give it. Ellie had nodded, then forgotten. The next morning, she was gone before sunrise. No breakfast dishes, no note. Just tire marks in the driveway. I thought she might cool off and come home later, but she didn't. Not that day, not the next. A week passed. The house felt hollow, like a shell after the tide goes out. I still made coffee for 2 out of habit. I still caught myself glancing toward her empty chair. Then, one evening, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in that impatient handwriting of hers. I sat on the porch and opened it. Grandpa, I don't know if you'll even read this, but I'm staying with a friend for now. You were right about one thing. I don't know what a home is anymore. Maybe I never did. I thought if I could fix everything, modernize it, make it mine, I'd finally feel proud of something. But all I did was break what you and Grandma built. I can't forgive you yet, but I understand why you did it. Ellie. I read that letter until the ink blurred. Then I folded it and tucked it next to Mary's photo on the mantel. That same night, George called. Tom, the buyers want to move up closing. 2 weeks. You okay with that? I stared at the house around me. Every wall, every dent, every creak that had held my whole life. Yeah, I said. Let's do it. 2 days before closing, Ellie came back. Her hair was messy, her eyes tired. She stood in the doorway like a stranger, unsure if she was welcome. I came to pack, she said softly. Kitchen boxes are in the pantry, I said. We worked in silence. She folded clothes, I wrapped dishes in newspaper. Once, she stopped and looked at me. Grandpa, are you sure about this? I nodded. The couple buying it, the Thompsons, they'll love it. They said they'll keep the rose bushes. Tears welled in her eyes. Grandma would like that. She would, I said. When we finished, she set one last box on the porch. Where will you go? She asked. Small apartment near the lake. Quiet. Cheap. Just me and the memories. She hesitated. Can I visit? I smiled faintly. If you bring coffee? And not that fancy stuff. The real kind. She laughed through her tears. Deal. As she got in her car to leave, I noticed something hanging from the rearview mirror. A gold ring. Old, dented, unmistakable. I stepped closer, my throat tightening. Ellie, where did you get that? She looked at it, then back at me. The guy I sold it to messaged me last week. Said he found an engraving inside. To M, forever yours, T. He thought I should have it back. She held it out to me, trembling. I think it belongs with you. I took the ring in my shaking hand. The metal was cold, but it felt alive. Maybe, I said, closing my fingers around it, it belongs to both of us. That night, I sat on the empty porch, the sold sign staked in the yard. The world felt smaller, but lighter too. I slipped the ring onto my pinky and whispered, "We did it, Mary." She found her way back. Some losses, I realized, are just lessons wrapped in pain, and sometimes selling everything is the only way to teach someone what can't be bought. Moving day came with the kind of dawn that feels hollow, bright but cold, like the light doesn't warm you anymore. The truck idled in the driveway, and every thump of a box down the porch steps echoed through my ribs. Ellie was quiet that morning. She'd stayed the night on the couch, surrounded by half-packed boxes and coffee cups. It was strange seeing her move around the kitchen she'd grown up in, careful now, gentle, like she finally understood she was touching something fragile. "Do you want me to handle the last few boxes?" she asked. "I've got it," I said, lifting one labeled Mary's things. My knees protested, but I didn't let her take it. "You just make sure your car's ready." She nodded, but I saw the guilt flicker behind her eyes. She'd barely said a word since returning the ring. Sometimes silence says everything words can't. The new owners, the Thompsons, were due by 10. George had promised they were good people, retired teachers who wanted a slower life, a garden, and a house with history. I liked that. Mary would have liked it too. By 9:30, the house was empty except for the echoes. I stood in the living room, running my hand along the wall where Ellie's height had been marked year after year. Little pencil lines climbing up the paint like a staircase of memories. 2012. Ellie, age 12, finally taller than Grandma. Mary had laughed so hard that day. "Grandpa?" Ellie's voice came from behind me. "They're here." Outside, a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. A man and woman stepped out, early 60s, smiles that looked kind. George followed them with a clipboard in hand. "Morning, Tom. Morning, Ellie. Perfect timing." We shook hands, went through the polite motions. Then the woman, Marjorie, looked around the porch and said softly, "It's even more beautiful in person. We promise we'll take good care of it." "Just keep the rose bushes alive," I said, trying to smile. She nodded. "They'll stay right where they are." After the paperwork was done, George pulled me aside. "Keys, Tom?" I hesitated. The metal was warm from my palm. "Been turning in this lock for 40 years, I murmured. "Time for new hands to turn it," George said gently. Ellie stood by the gate, watching, arms folded tight. I walked to her, held out the keys, then pulled them back. "One last thing before we go." We walked to the backyard, where Mary's garden was. Wild now, but still alive. The roses bent toward the light, pink and white, stubborn as ever. I knelt, took the ring from my pocket, and pressed it gently into the soil. Ellie gasped. "Grandpa, what are you—" "Putting her home," I said, "where she belongs." She never wanted it locked away, or sold, or displayed. She wanted it to live, just like this place. Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa." "I know." I reached up and squeezed her hand. "You just forgot. We all do sometimes." For a moment, the only sound was the breeze moving through the trees. Then Marjorie called from the porch. "We'll take good care of her garden, Mr. Peterson." I turned, smiled faintly. "That's all I ask." Ellie and I drove away in her Toyota, the same car she'd bought with the ring's money. Funny how life loops back on itself. She was quiet the whole way, fingers tapping the steering wheel, eyes shining, but focused on the road. Where to now? She asked when we reached the edge of town. Lakeview Apartments, I said. Building C, Unit 12. She looked at me. That's the one by the water, right? Yeah, small, but the view's nice. Reminds me of the lake Mary and I used to fish at. When we pulled up, she insisted on helping me carry the boxes. The place was modest. Single bedroom, small kitchen, balcony with just enough space for 2 chairs. She unpacked quietly while I set up the old clock on the counter. It ticked just like it always had, stubbornly refusing to stop. Do you like it? She asked after a while. I looked around. It'll do. She hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I wanted to show you something. It was a photo, the garden, the ring half buried in the soil, sunlight glinting off the gold. Under it, a message she'd written in neat cursive. Some things can't be owned, only cared for. I sent this to the Thompsons, she said. They said they'll leave it there, like a blessing. My throat tightened. That's good, Ellie. There's something else. She bit her lip, nervous. I talked to my manager at work. They're opening a community project, helping older folks rent rooms instead of selling their houses. I'm joining the team. I blinked at her, unsure if I heard right. You mean helping people keep their homes? Yeah, she said, smiling through her tears. So no one has to go through what we did. I laughed, the first real laugh in months. Your grandma would have loved that. I think she does, Ellie said softly, wherever she is. We stood by the balcony, watching the water catch the late afternoon sun. For the first time in a long while, there was peace between us, fragile but real. Then Ellie reached into her jacket and handed me a small velvet box. Before you say anything, she said, it's not a ring. I opened it. Inside was a key, brass, old-fashioned. It's for the garden shed, she said. The Thompsons said we can visit any time. I thought maybe you'd want to go back, water the roses once in a while. I didn't say anything. I just hugged her. For the first time since Mary died, it felt like family again. We sat there until sunset, the sky burning gold and soft pink. The kind of color that makes you think maybe some stories don't end. They just change shape. When Ellie left that night, she turned at the door and said, Grandpa, I know you sold the house to teach me a lesson, but it feels like you gave me something instead. I smiled. That's the trick, kiddo. The best lessons are gifts in disguise. After she drove off, I poured myself a cup of tea, sat on the balcony, and looked out at the still water. The ring was gone, the house was gone, but somehow the love remained, steady, quiet, unshakable. Mary used to say life's like a garden. You lose a few petals, you plant again. Maybe she was right. I took out Ellie's letter from my pocket and whispered, We did it, Mare. She found her way home, even if home isn't a place anymore. Then I closed my eyes and listened to the wind carry the sound of the roses I could almost still smell. 3 months passed before I stepped foot near that old house again. I kept telling myself I was too busy settling into apartment life, paying bills online, learning how to make coffee in a tiny drip machine instead of Mary's old percolator, chatting with my new neighbors who smelled like liniment and loneliness. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid to see what had become of it, afraid that maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. If you enjoy the story, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me bring more tales to life. Thanks for being here. One Saturday morning in late September, Ellie showed up at my door. No warning, no text, just a knock and the faint smell of cinnamon coffee drifting in from the hallway. She was holding a paper bag and wearing that same hesitant smile she used to have as a child when she'd broken something valuable. Morning, Grandpa, she said. I brought breakfast. I stepped aside. You bribing your way in? Maybe, she grinned. Depends how mad you still are. I took the bag from her, the warmth soaking into my palms. I stopped being mad the moment you started learning. She looked at me then, serious, searching my face for truth. And she must have found it because she exhaled, shoulders softening. There's something I want you to see. She handed me a folded flyer. Community Restoration Project, helping families keep their homes. At the bottom, in smaller print, Program Director, Eleanor Peterson. Director? I said, raising an eyebrow. She blushed a little. It's small, just me and 2 volunteers. But we've helped 3 seniors refinance instead of sell. You'd be surprised how many people are about to lose everything because they don't understand the fine print. I stared at her, really stared. For the first time in years, I saw Mary's fire in her eyes, the same quiet defiance that used to make me fall in love all over again. "You're doing good work," I said softly. "I learned from the best," she replied. We ate breakfast on the balcony. The sun glinted off the water like gold dust, and for a while, we just sat there in peace, until Ellie said, "There's one more stop we need to make today. You up for a drive?" I should have guessed where we were going, but when she turned onto Rose Hill Lane and that old house came into view, my heart still stuttered. It looked alive. The fence was freshly painted. The garden weeded and blooming brighter than I'd seen in years. The Thompsons had strung wind chimes on the porch, and their laughter carried faintly through the morning air. Ellie parked the car but didn't move to get out. "They invited us," she said quietly. "I've been coming by once a week to help with the garden. They wanted to thank you." I swallowed hard. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," she cut in gently. "I needed to." The screen door creaked open. Marjorie Thompson waved with her gardening gloves still on. "Mr. Peterson, we were hoping you'd come. The roses are outdoing themselves this year." We walked through the gate, and my knees almost buckled when I saw it. The exact spot where I'd buried Mary's ring. Right there in the soil, between the rose bushes, a small wooden plaque gleamed in the sunlight. "For Mary, who taught us that love, once planted, never dies." My throat closed. I touched the plaque, the smooth grain of the wood warm from the sun. "You did this?" I asked Ellie. She shook her head. "Mrs. Thompson did. I just told her the story." Marjorie smiled softly. "Your wife's ring is still down there, you know. We couldn't bear to move it. It belongs to this place." I nodded, words failing me. Then Mr. Thompson came over, wiping his hands on a rag. "We also wanted to show you something," he said, pulling out a small envelope. Inside were a few photographs, the kitchen restored to its old colors, the living room walls repainted the same pale cream Mary loved, and the pencil marks, Ellie's growth chart, preserved behind a thin glass panel. "We almost painted over them," he said, "but your granddaughter told us the story. Thought it'd be wrong to erase it." Ellie looked away, blinking fast. "Some memories don't need covering up," she whispered. We spent the rest of the morning walking through the garden, talking about roses, soil, and time. The air smelled like mint and fresh paint. For the first time since Mary died, I didn't feel like a ghost walking through my own past. As we were leaving, Marjorie called after me. "Oh, Mr. Peterson, one more thing. The house still feels like it's yours. You're welcome any time. There's always coffee." I smiled. "Careful what you offer? I might take you up on that." On the way back, Ellie drove in silence. Then, halfway down the hill, she said quietly, "I think I finally understand, Grandpa. Why you sold it. Why it had to hurt." I waited. "You didn't want to punish me," she said. "You wanted me to see what I couldn't see. That love isn't measured in what we keep, but in what we protect." I nodded slowly. "That's all I ever wanted, Ellie. For you to protect something real, not chase shiny things that fade." She smiled faintly. "Guess I inherited your stubborn streak." "That's the only inheritance worth having," I said. That evening, back in my apartment, she unpacked one last thing from her bag, a small potted rosebush. "From Grandma's garden," she said. "They let me take a cutting. It's a new start." I placed it on the balcony, right where the sunset hit best. The petals were pale pink, trembling in the wind. I could almost hear Mary's voice, warm and amused. "You finally got her to water something, Tom." Ellie laughed when I told her that. "Maybe she's right," she said. "I'm learning." Before she left, she hugged me tight. "You know," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder, "I think Grandma would be proud of both of us." I held her for a moment, then whispered, "No, kiddo, she already is." When she drove away, I stood on the balcony, the lake glowing orange beneath the setting sun, the rosebush catching the light like a small fire. The house was gone, the ring was gone, but somehow everything that mattered had come home again. And as the first evening breeze brushed past me, I smiled and said into the quiet, "Rest easy, Mary. The garden's safe now. It's funny how peace sneaks up on you when you're not looking for it. One morning, you wake up, pour your coffee, look out over the lake, and realize your chest doesn't feel so heavy anymore. That's how it's been lately. Quiet mornings, no anger, no noise, just life humming softly around me, the way it used to when Mary would hum while folding laundry. It's been a year since I sold the house. I still count time that way, before the sale, after the sale, like there's an invisible line between who I was and who I am now. Ellie visits every Sunday. Sometimes she brings pastries, sometimes just stories, always with a smile that feels steadier than before. That Sunday she came by earlier than usual. She was wearing a loose cardigan and carrying that same nervous excitement she used to have before giving me birthday gifts when she was little. "You doing anything today, Grandpa?" "Nothing that can't wait," I said. "Good," she said, eyes bright. "You're coming with me." "Am I now?" "Yup." No arguments. She drove, and I didn't ask where. The road curved past the hills, and I could feel the wind through the window, cold and clean. After half an hour, I realized where we were going. Not back to the old house, but past it, to the small cemetery down the hill. Mary's resting place. I hadn't been there in months, not because I didn't want to, but because every time I thought about it, guilt would whisper that I'd already said enough goodbyes. Ellie parked under the big oak tree. "Come on," she said softly. The headstone looked the same, simple white marble with her name and a line she'd chosen herself. To love and be loved, enough. The grass around it was freshly cut, and someone had planted new roses. I didn't ask who. Ellie knelt and brushed some fallen leaves away. Then she pulled something from her pocket, a thin gold chain with a small heart-shaped locket. "I made this," she said, handing it to me. "Inside's a photo of you and Grandma, the one from your wedding, and a tiny bit of soil from the garden." I opened it carefully. The miniature photo was faded, but her eyes were still bright, that mischievous spark that had carried me through decades. My own face looked younger, almost like I didn't know yet how lucky I was. "She'd like this," I said quietly. Ellie smiled. "That's why I made it, so she could stay close. I wear one just like it." We stood there in silence, the wind rustling through the trees. "Grandpa," she said finally, "do you ever regret selling the house?" I thought about it. About the nights I'd spent awake, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. Then I looked at her, this woman who'd learned to trade greed for gratitude, who carried my wife's lessons like a compass. "No," I said, "because if I hadn't, we'd both still be lost in it." She nodded, understanding. "It doesn't feel like loss anymore. It feels like a story that ended the way it was supposed to." We left flowers in the little locket at the headstone. As we walked back to the car, Ellie said, "I've been thinking about starting a new program through our project, helping families restore old homes instead of selling them. Call it Mary's Promise. What do you think?" I couldn't help but laugh. "I think your grandma would have already drawn up the budget." Ellie grinned. "Then I guess I'll need a board member who knows how to say no when I dream too big." "Oh, I can say no," I said, smiling, "but I'll help anyway." We stopped for lunch at the diner on the way home. She ordered pancakes. I got black coffee and eggs like always. The waitress recognized us. We'd been coming there more lately, and brought an extra biscuit for your granddaughter, the hero. Ellie turned bright red. When we left, she slipped her hand into mine, just for a moment. Not like a little girl holding her grandfather's hand, but like an equal, someone who finally understood what it meant to carry family forward instead of just inheriting it. That night, after she dropped me off, I went out to the balcony. The rosebush she'd brought from the garden had grown wild and thick, petals spilling over the pot. The scent was faint in the evening breeze, familiar, comforting. I sat there a long time, watching the moon ripple across the water, and I felt Mary beside me, quiet and proud. "You did good, Tom," her voice seemed to say. Maybe it was just the wind, or maybe some promises really do echo back when you've kept them. I took one last look at the lake, then at the tiny rosebush, and whispered, "It's all yours now, kiddo. The house, the lessons, the love, all yours." And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace. Not because I'd won or even forgiven, but because I'd finally learned what Mary always knew. You can sell a house. You can lose a ring, but you can't lose what love has already planted. And as the wind moved through the petals, I could swear I heard her laughter again. Soft, certain, eternal. The end. If you liked the story, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and write in the comments if something like this has ever happened in your life. I'd love to hear your stories. Thank you for watching.